now going to be looking at why the Weimar Republic was unpopular during its early years. So the main reason is that the politicians who set up and ran the Weimar Republic were the same ones as those who had surrendered at the end of the First World War, and therefore they were the ones who had accepted the unpopular peace treaty. As a result, the Weimar Republic was always linked to surrender and harsh peace treaty terms. So the Treaty of Versailles was a set of agreements. It was the peace treaty signed which the Germans had to follow because they had lost the war. The treaty was signed in the French palace at Versailles on 28 June 1919, and the terms were unpopular because there were several reasons. It wasn't just what the treaty had asked the Germans to do, but it was also the way the treaty had been signed. And it was a diktat, which meant that it was imposed upon the Germans. Before this treaty was signed, most Germans assumed that Germany would be able to negotiate the terms of the peace treaty, but the Allies refused to allow any German representatives to join in the treaty discussions. And therefore, it was a diktat imposed, not agreed. So now let's look at the terms of the treaty. So the biggest one was the War Guilt Clause, which was Article 231 of the treaty. The War Guilt Clause meant that since the Germans were to blame for starting the war, Germany had to pay reparations, which was sort of compensations for the damage that had been caused to the victorious nations, in other words, the Allies. And to prevent Germany from starting another war in the future, since they had been blamed for the First World War, the Allies insisted on reduction in Germany's armed forces and territory, and so the Germans did hate the War Guilt Clause. So Germany had to pay reparations to the Allies, and this was at £6.6 billion, but Germany was nowhere near able to afford this much because it was a war-torn country. They were in an economic recession. Germany also lost all its colonies, so the 11 German colonies in Africa and the Far East were given to the victorious countries, so the countries that had won, to look after, known as mandates. And the size of the military was also cut for the Germans, so the army was limited to 100,000 men with no heavy artillery. The navy was also limited to only 6 battleships, 6 cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 12 torpedo boats. There were no submarines, and the rest of their fleet was destroyed, and they were allowed no aircraft either. And therefore, you can see that Germany didn't have much. They weren't in a position to fight back at all, to change the terms or force the Allies to, be a bit kinder to them. Therefore, altogether, with the land that they lost, with the population, with like the coal fields and everything, Germany lost 10% of its population, 13% of its European territory, 15% of its iron, and 15% of its coal reserves, which was a huge, huge loss. Now, it's important that you learn these key figures, key dates, statistics, because it gives you a lot of supporting evidence for your point. It shows that you really know what you're talking about in the exam. So let's have a look at Dostros. This was the idea that the Germans believed that they had not actually lost the war, but instead people thought they had. But this was the idea that the German army believed that they had not been defeated, and therefore the army was betrayed by politicians. Thus, the term "stab in the back," that the politicians did something without consulting the army first, even though they were in retreat, even though they didn't have any supplies. They had a huge amount of casualties, and they couldn't win the war even if they had continued to fight. So let's look at the impact of the Treaty of Versailles on the Weimar Republic. So the Treaty of Versailles hugely damaged Germany's economy and imposed heavy reparations so that it could not start another world war. And this made the economy of the Weimar Republic weak from the outset, because now the Germany had to pay reparations to these other countries when they didn't have an economy of their own. They had lost so much wealth of their own. They simply in no way or form could afford to pay these reparations. And this also made the Weimar Republic politically weak. The treaty was so harsh that people resented the leaders of the new German Republic who signed it, and these politicians became known as the November criminals. And so From the beginning, the Weimar Republic was linked to defeat, humiliation, and weakness, thus having a very negative impact on the Weimar Republic, leading it to be unpopular. And that is it for why the Weimar Republic was unpopular. If this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave any questions down below and I will answer them.